as usual, I'll just talk a little and then it'll be for you to question me whatever you want to question. Just to start off, we've all come to a great doctor, in fact the greatest of all doctors, Bhagavan. And like any good doctor, he's not so much concerned with our symptoms. He's concerned with the cause of those symptoms, the disease itself. And he has diagnosed that the disease we all suffer from is simply ego, nothing but ego. In Vedanta and Advaita, they use many fancy words like Maya, Avidya, to describe this problem. But Bhagavan said it all boils down to ego. And by ego, he doesn't mean ego in the sense of, in the superficial sense of pride or arrogance, that's also included. He means what actually is it that is proud or arrogant? What is it that has desires? What is it that is greedy? What is it that is jealous? All these, whatever evil, the root of all evil is ego. Because whatever evil quality we can think of, it is the ego that has that quality. So we may feel we are relatively good people, we're not so bad as some other people, but we still have this ego, we all have this ego. And even feeling ourselves to be a little bit better than others is itself an ego. So this ego is the big problem we all face. And Bhagavan not only diagnosed this as being the disease that we're all suffering from, he also prescribed the remedy. And this is what is very, very special about Bhagavan, because he understood what is the nature of the ego, and he explained it very clearly. The ego is a mixture of the reality, what we really are, that is the pure I, our real self, whatever we call it, and extraneous adjuncts. Those extraneous adjuncts, the body, the mind, whatever we say, I am this person, I am sitting here, I am talking, all these things that we append to I, that we join to I, these are all extraneous adjuncts which we confuse with ourselves. So this is what the ego is, it's this confused self-awareness, this confused feeling, I am this body, I am this person, I am this mind, I am here in London in 2014, we limit ourselves within a small space, small time. This is what the ego is. The essence of this ego is the reality, the pure I. But so long as we confuse this pure I with these adjuncts, all the problems are there. And so the ego cannot exist except by attaching itself to adjuncts. So in verse 25 of Uludunaptu, he says, Urupatriundam, grasping form, it comes into existence. By form, he means anything that is anything other than I, anything that has some distinguishing features that we can distinguish a thought from a feeling, from a sight, from a sound. All these distinctions we make, all these distinctions we experience, these are all forms. So grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping urupatriundam, urupatrinekam, grasping form, it stands, it sustains itself. Urupatru undu mikro ongam, grasping form and feeding on the forms, it expands greatly, it rises high, it expands greatly. Uruvittu urupatram, leaving one form, it grasps another form. It never remains without holding on to some form or other, something other than itself. Then he gives the essential clue. Tedinal optum piticum. If sought, it takes flight. What he means by that is, if we investigate it, it disappears. Because He ends by saying, Uluvachupaya Hande, the formless ghost ego. So this ego is just like a ghost. It has no form of its own, but it can rise and dance and do all its mischief only by grasping onto form. But if we seek it, it disappears. What this essentially means is, so long as we are attending to anything other than ourselves, anything other than I, we are feeding our ego. The only way to make the ego subside is to attend to it. When it ceases to attend to anything else and attends only to I, then it subsides. That's what he means by Tedin Alafam Pidikum. When sought, it takes flight. So this is the special property of the ego. Bhagavan understood very clearly, and this is why he said vichara is the only way to destroy the ego and to experience ourselves as we really are. Because so long as we attend to anything other than I, we are feeding our ego. So whatever meditation we may do, whatever japa, dhyana, puja, we may have some form of God in our mind that we meditate upon, that seems to us to be the highest of all things. But even that is feeding our ego. Attending to anything other than I is feeding our ego. If we want this ego to subside, if we want to know what God really is, it's the ego which stands between us and God, because God is nothing but what we really are, our own self. So the very rising of this ego is what seemingly separates us from God. So if we want to experience God, there's no use, not exactly no use, we're not going to experience Him directly by meditating on any form of Jesus or Buddha or Rama or Krishna or any other form of God, because that is not what God really is. What God really is only I. It's always in our heart as I. So only by turning our attention towards this I will the ego subside, and will we experience ourselves as we really are, and thereby experience God as He really is. So this is why he, for 54 years he kept on stressing, we have to know what is this I. Whatever question people asked him, he asked, who wants to know this? Whatever problem people came and expressed to him, he said, who has this problem? Because he's trying to get us to turn our attention back to this I. Because if we investigate this I, in Upadeshundi he says, if we investigate the form of the mind, that is this I, without forgetfulness, that's without getting distracted by other things, we'll find Manamenu Mondrele, there's no such thing as mind at all. This ego doesn't actually exist. It just seems to exist. It's like if we see a rope in the half-light of dusk, we mistake it to be a snake. That snake doesn't actually exist, but it causes all sorts of problems. So long as we believe the snake is there, we are afraid of it. But if we look at it very carefully, it takes flight. We search for it and it disappears, because all it is a rope. So all this ego really is the one infinite real I, the pure I. But we can experience that only by investigating it, only by scrutinizing it, only by keeping a constant watch on this ego. Its real nature be revealed, which is that pure I. This is the sum and substance of Bhagavan's teaching. This is why Bhagavan didn't, if you want to study Advaita philosophy, there are big books on Advaita philosophy, so many complicated concepts are there, because the human mind likes to complicate things. Bhagavan likes to simplify things, so he's reduced the whole of the vast philosophy of Advaita. In fact, all philosophy of the world, he's reduced down to this one thing. All problems are caused by this ego. The only way to deal with this ego is to cease attending to anything else and watch this ego alone. When we watch it, it subsides and disappears, merges back the source, which is what we really are. Sorry, anyone else? I said my little bit, which is not really mine, it's Bhagavan's.
Could we say, Michael, that all the problems of the world are due to the ego?
The world itself is due to the ego, Bhagavan says. In the next verse of Urganaptu, he says, Ahandai undain anatum undain. If ego comes into being, everything comes into being. Ahandai indru anatum. That is, if ego is not, nothing is.
So there's really nothing but ego.
Yes. Then he says, Ahandai yavamam. The ego is everything. So all this world we see is just an expansion of our own egos.
Yeah. Sorry, there's something else.
Yes.
Yes, you've been writing in the Mountain Path.
Yes.
A couple of years now.
Yeah.
And I was looking at part 7 the other day, and I came across a part where you were talking about, you were relaying what Sadhu Om said about verse 15 of Avadu Napadu.
Mm.
And I'll quote it because probably most people don't remember it by heart. It says, past and future stand depending on the present. While occurring, they are both only the present. Therefore, the present is only only one time that actually exists. Hence, without knowing the truth of the present, trying to know the past or future is like trying to count without knowing the value of the unit one. And then afterwards, you say, or Sadhu Om says, the truth of the present is that it is non-existent. But in the verse, it seemed to be saying that the present is the only one time that actually exists. Carrying on with Sadhu Om's comment on the verse, he said, the truth of the present is that it is non-existent. If we know that, then we can judge the true value of all other knowledge. The present place and time, the here and now, is I am. No second or third person can truly exist in the here and now, because they are all objects known by the first person, which alone is here, in inverted commas. And hence, they occupy places other than here. Second and third persons are subject to change and hence to time, so they exist only in the constant flow of time from past to present, never stopping in the present. So I'm finding this a bit difficult to get a handle on, because first of all in the verse it seems to be saying the present is real. I thought, well, yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
And then the next second, it's non-existent.
Okay, well this is the exact parallel of what Bhagavan says about the ego. He says everything is the ego, and the ego is non-existent.
Yeah.
So first he reduces everything down to the root. And then if we investigate that root, we will find it doesn't exist. So nothing exists. Only the pure I, that alone exists. But Bhagavan says the present alone exists. That is, it's the only time that exists. But if we scrutinize that present, we find it is not a time, it is just I. So in that sense, as a time, it is non-existent. As I, it alone is. What makes here the present place, and what makes now the present time? Why do we feel this particular moment in 2014 is now? Why do we feel this particular room where we're all sitting, why do we feel this is here? What is present to make it present? It is the presence of I that makes all these things present, seem present. Wherever I is, that seems to be the present moment and the present time. So it all boils down to this I. So long as we experience time and space, we are experiencing something other than I. And so long as we're experiencing something other than the I that is experiencing that is not the pure I, it is the ego. Because the pure I, in the view of the pure I, it alone exists, nothing else exists. So long as we feel we're experiencing anything other than I, we are experiencing ourselves as the ego, as the adjunct bound I.
But what do you mean then when you say I exists? I mean, what does that mean?
Well, I definitely does exist, but the problem is we very clearly know there's the one thing we cannot doubt is the fact that I am. Everything else could be, it all could be an illusion, it all could be a dream. But the one thing that cannot be an illusion is I. Because in order to experience anything, whether it's an illusion or whether it's real, I must exist to experience it. So the one thing that is necessarily true is I. But though we very clearly know that I am, we don't clearly know what I am. Because we now, though we know this I very clearly, it is now mixed and confused with other things. I feel I am Michael. I am this body, I'm sitting here. Each of us has that feeling. We confuse this I with the adjuncts which are now attached to it. So when we say I am, now, so long as we are experiencing ourselves as a person, we mean I, this person, am. But what makes us feel this person exists? It is because of the essential I-ness in this person. Everything else about this person. Michael is unreal, his body is unreal, the mind is unreal, our birth, our death, everything is unreal. What is real in all this is only I.
Yes, and you say, I mean, we've gone a little bit further than that because we've listened to you, we've listened to Bhagavan.
Right.
We kind of understand some of that.
Yes.
And we've realised that I is featureless. So, and it's in such an infinitesimal sliver of time.
Yes.
Time is just a word signifying nothing, more or less.
Yes.
So, what we're left with seems to be a featureless nothing, yet that nothing is aware in some sense.
Yes.
And knows that it exists.
Yes.
In some sense.
Yes.
But we can't say anything more than that. So
Yes.
we're reduced to actually saying nothing. We just have to shut up.
Well, that's why Bhagavan, yes. That is why Bhagavan said the ultimate teaching is silence. Because when we've all read Bhagavan's teaching, we've all understood in some way or other, whether we may not have understood perfectly, but we all have some sort of idea what Bhagavan is saying. But who is it that has understood? It is the ego that has understood. So the understanding of the ego cannot be the real understanding. So long as we experience ourselves as this ego, we have not really understood. We may have superficially understood the words that Bhagavan has said, but we haven't really understood. To really understand it, we must experience it as ourselves. But this, now we have just this superficial understanding, but this superficial understanding is useful. Because of this understanding, we understand what is the one thing that is worth making research on is this I. The one thing that is worth investigating is this I. The one thing that we should be keeping a watch on is this I. If we've understood that much, that is sufficient. But because our mind keeps on going out and being enamored by all the things of the world, we again and again we read and we study Bhagavan's teaching to constantly remind us that what we should be doing is not reading the physical books or even the electronic books on our computer screen. We should be reading the book of our heart. That is I. That is silence.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. But most of the time, when it could be that most of the time, when we attempt to attend to I, we're actually attending to ego and its machinations. Yeah. I mean.
Yes, but it doesn't matter. If you attend to the ego, that is sufficient, because whether you... The snake is actually a rope, but to us it appears to be a snake. So long as it appears to be a snake, we should look at it carefully to see what it is. So even if we now experience I as the ego, we should look carefully at this ego to see what it really is, and then what it really is will reveal itself, which is the pure I.
Yes.
So often people ask questions, there's this constant confusion, as if there are two I's. Because we talk of ego and we talk of self, it seems as if there are two I's. But actually they're not two I's, any more than there are two things lying on the ground. It seems to be a snake, it's actually only a rope. There are no two things there, it's only one thing. So what seems now to be this ego is actually the pure I. So we don't have to worry, oh, I don't know this pure I only know the ego, how can I investigate that pure I? Investigate the ego. But when people used to ask me, when in self-inquiry, is the I we have to investigate, is it self or the ego? He often said it's ego. Because he knows that what we take to be ego is actually self. So we cannot investigate this ego without investigating what we really are.
But you also say that ego is a featureless no thing.
It's featureless in the... Yes, it is featureless in the sense... But why it is featureless? Because it is the pure I, which has no distinguishing features. It's not separate from anything. Everything else every object we know, everything other than I, we know it as something other than I because it's got some features. Whereas I is the pure base on which all these things appear. It is the space of consciousness in which all this dream appears and disappears. So it has no definable, distinguishing features. There are no features that distinguish it from anything else. But we do experience it as I. So that is why Bhagavan generally, sometimes he spoke of this as Swarupa Dhyana, meditating on our own form. But more often when talking about it as meditation, he generally spoke of it as vichara. Vichara means investigation. We're investigating to find out what it is.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.
I want to ask a related question.
Yeah.
When we investigate the I,
Yeah.
our focus is on the ego. We are investigating whether the ego is there or not.
Okay.
At the same time, we also meditate on I am. When I meditate on I am, the focus is not on I.
Do you have two?
No,
you have an I am and an ego. They're the same thing.
Same I.
Yeah.
Same I, but
Yeah.
the ego is I with adjuncts.
Yes.
I with upadhis.
Yes.
And I without upadhis
Yes.
is the real I.
Yes.
That is the
Yes.
Atma.
Yes.
So when I meditate on I am,
Yes.
then the I am is nearer the self
Yes.
rather than ego.
Well, the thing is, it is ego so long as it's attending to anything else, anything other than I. But when it tries to attend to itself, it subsides. It
Yes.
ceases to be ego and it remains as our real self. That's why in Maharshi's Gospel, Bhagavan says in one point, he explains that the ego, or aham-vritti, the I thought, is nothing but a chit jada granti. That it's a knot which seemingly binds the chit, which is I am, with jada, what is non-conscious, that is body and mind and everything. It binds these together as if they are one. But he said, in your investigation into the source of the aham vritti, into the source of the ego, you take the essential chit aspect.
Yes.
That is the ego is now I am this body. We don't sit down and meditate on this body, do we? We meditate on the I, the essential chit aspect of the ego.
Yes.
That is what we are focusing on. That is why he says this will infallibly lead us to what we really are, to the infinite consciousness that is our real self.
Another question is about the celebrated Ekashloki of
Yes.
Gita.
Yes.
It says, Hridaya Kuhara Madhye Kevalam
Yes.
Brahmamatram.
Yes.
Ahameti Atma-rupena bhati.
Yes.
Riti Visha Vinasha. Chinvata va
Yes.
Majjata va.
Yes.
The last sentence is confusing. The last sentence is Pavana Chalana Virodha, Pavana Chalana Rodha,
Yes.
Atmanishto Bhavatvam.
Right.
Now Pavana Chalana Bhavat means stopping the movement of breath.
Yes.
Pavana Chalana Virodha,
Yes.
Atmanishto Bhavatvam.
Yes.
Now, where does the question of stopping the movement of breath come in? Whether it's qualified Chinvata,
Yes.
whether
Well,
it's qualified Majjata, or there are three methods or two methods.
One thing that is essential to understand about this verse, the person who started to write this verse was a person called Jagdisha Sastri. He had a certain idea in mind. He was trying to express that in a verse. He wasn't able to do so. So he asked Bhagavan, and Bhagavan wrote the verse for him. And Bhagavan signed it Jagdisharam. That is, he's writing it as Jagdisha's idea. Fortunately, because Jagdisha had been with Bhagavan for a long time, most of the ideas in that verse are Bhagavan's own ideas. First two lines perfect. Third line, no problem. Fourth line, where this Paramachana Rodak comes in, that is where there's a confusion. Because in order to stop the movement of the breath, we think we have to attend to the breath. We cannot, so long as if our aim is to stop the breath, we are attending to the breath, so we are feeding the ego. But Bhagavan has revealed something. If you attend to the the ego, it will subside. And because the ego, the prana, the breath, and the life in the body, it comes into existence along with the ego, and exists, continues to exist so long as the ego is there experiencing it. When the ego subsides, it also subsides. So if we simply do the Swam Chimbata, that automatically is controlling the breath. But the word, there is a word there, or. Va, yes. That it means either by this or by this. That is where it's misleading, because we, independently of the Samchimbata, independently of the self-attentiveness, we cannot make the ego subside and thereby abide in self. So we have to view that verse not as Bhagavan's pure teaching, but as Bhagavan's pure teaching, a bit like the ego. It's the pure I mixed with the adjunct. The adjunct there, the upadi, is the Pavarana Rodak and the Va. That is the adjunct, which is from Jagdisha Sastri's idea. The rest of it is Bhagavan's idea.
So it doesn't qualify. Pavanachalana Virodha doesn't qualify either Majjata or Chinvata.
If we do the Chimbata, the Chimbata and the Majjata are not separate, because if we attend to I, the ego subsides. Majjata means going down, subsiding. Diving is how it's sometimes translated. But what actually it's referring to is the subsidence of the ego. So by Swam Chimbata, Majjata happens automatically, and by Swam Chimbata, Pavanachalana Rodak also happens automatically. The problem is, if we neglect to attend only to I, and think we can make the mind subside by Pavanachalana Rodak, that's by pranayama, Bhagavan has said, if the mind will if made to subside by other means such as pranayama, the mind will remain as if subsided, will rise again. In other words, it will subside into a state of laya. Bhagavan says categorically in Nanya, it's an aid to control, to keep the mind in check, but it will not destroy the mind, pranayama. He said categorically there. So that many people get confused because it's written in gold letters about Bhagavan's Samadhi. This is the essence of Bhagavan's teaching. Yes. It's not actually. When Bhagavan wrote Ulladu, originally there were a collection of some 20 to 30 verses, stray verses, which Mudrana had gathered together, and he asked Bhagavan to form it into a complete work of 40 verses. As Bhagavan and Mudrana were discussing and Bhagavan was writing the verses, they began deleting one by one. This was one of the ones that was deleted. Because it's not Bhagavan's pure teaching. That is why it finds a place, the Tamil version of it finds a place in Ulladu Anubandham, the supplement, yes, but not in Ulladu, which is the pure teaching of Bhagavan. Ulladu Anubandham, the supplement, has some things are pure Bhagavan teaching, some things are what he translates from other places. It's a mixture.
The Bhajata does not mean diving into the heart. That is another technique which has been mentioned.
What is the heart? The heart is I. Heart means the center. The center is I. The center of everything is I. Bhagavan often repeatedly said, heart means nothing other than I. It was only because some people whose minds are enamored by all this yoga and all these chakras and or nadas and all these things, as soon as Bhagavan said I, heart, they said, is this anahata chakra? Bhagavan said no. Then where in the body is it? Then Bhagavan said, relative to the body, the place where we feel the center of I is 2 degrees to the right from the center of the chest. But that is not the real heart. Yes. That cannot be the real heart. How can the body, which comes into existence only after the ego rises, how can that be the heart from which the ego rises? Cannot be. So Majjata simply means, it's a metaphorical way of saying subside. So either the mind should subside by attending to I, well, there's no either or. I mean, that verse implies either this or this. But in fact, Bhagavan has made it clear there is no alternative. The only way. That's why I said first about this secret Bhagavan has revealed about the nature of the ego. The nature of the ego is to be sustained and to be fed by attending to anything other than I. That is why by attending to anything other than I, we cannot destroy the ego. The only way to destroy it is to attend only to I. That is, if we understand that one basic principle, Bhagavan's teaching becomes very clear. And we can make out, for instance, if we read talks, in talks there are so many things Bhagavan says, we can find things in talks where Bhagavan directly contradicts things in other places. Because in talks, he's answering individual questioners. Each person who comes and asks questions, they have their own beliefs, their own aspirations, their own needs, individual needs. So according to them, Bhagavan, according to their beliefs and aspirations and needs, Bhagavan answers their questions. We can't take everything that Bhagavan says. Just a day or two ago, someone asked me, but somewhere it said in talks or somewhere, someone asked Bhagavan, are our prayers answered? And Bhagavan said, yes. Thought force never goes in vain. If that is true, if we take that as a universal truth, prayers are answered, then how do we account for the fact in a war where people on both sides who are praying that their side is going to win? How is God to answer both, to satisfy, answer both their prayers? It is absolutely, I mean, it's simple logic says prayers cannot always be answered. And even if prayers could always be answered, it wouldn't be good because prayers are our desires, our whims and fancies. If God satisfies every whim and fancy we have, that's not good for us. He knows what is good for us. He's already ordained our prarabdha. So why should we pray, oh Bhagavan, I want this, I don't want that, as if by our prayer he's going to change our prarabdha just for our sake. He knows what is good for us. He's already prescribed it as our prarabdha. So only prayer that is actually useful is praying for the annihilation of the ego. Because if we pray for the annihilation of the ego, we, at least to that extent, we are willing to give up this ego. And this ego can never be destroyed unless we are willing to give it up. Prayer is the beginning, you can say. Praying for the annihilation of the ego is the beginning. If we pray and pray and pray, still this ego isn't subsiding. What are we to do about this ego? We have to investigate and find what the problem is. So prayer will give us the purity of mind to investigate this ego and thereby to annihilate it. So that is the one prayer which will surely be answered. Not immediately, because we're not yet ready for it. Though we are asking for it, 99% of us doesn't really want it. We could attain jnana here and now. There's nothing easier than experiencing ourselves as we really are. The whole problem is we have too many desires and attachments. We're more interested in other things than we are in experiencing only I.
Excuse me. Could you please describe the process of vichara, or technical vichara? I read it in a few books, but I don't think I got it quite right. So I'm very interested.
Well, even the word technique is a bit misleading because it sounds like it's something technical. It's actually very, very simple. As I was explaining, if you attend to anything other than I, you are nourishing the ego. But if you try to attend to the ego itself, to the I itself, the ego will subside. So vichara is nothing but attending to I. Vigilantly scrutinizing, watching I. So if you keep your attention on this I, that is all there is to vichara.
So is it, for example, let's say I'm worried, and some observing this process of me being worried or angry, or is that what it is?
Yeah.
That you constantly observing. What about this inquiry?
Where
Where am I?
Yeah,
or just constant observation, awareness of
yes, that is. There's a problem with the translation of vichara as inquiry, because inquiry in English has two meanings. It can mean asking questions. It can mean investigating. When Bhagavan used the word vichara, he used it in the sense of investigation. So it's not just a matter of asking who am I, it's a matter of investigating who am I. How to investigate who am I? If Bhagavan asks you, investigate what's written in this book, you don't sit down and close your eyes and say, what is written in this book, what is written in this book? No. You open the book and read what's written in it. So also when he says, investigate what is I, investigate who am I, you have to look at this I to find out what it is.
That refers to ego I, isn't it? That who am I? That refers to ego I. Who am I?
There is only one I. What now seems to be an ego is actually the real I. But so long as we experience it as if it's an ego, we should attend to that. That is why I said this snake and rope analogy is a very good analogy. If you're walking along a path with Bhagavan in the dark and you suddenly see a snake on the path, you're afraid. Bhagavan will tell you, no, it's not a snake, it's only a rope, look at it carefully. We don't ask Bhagavan, should I look at the snake or should I look at the rope? What we see is a snake in our view, but Bhagavan tells us to look at it carefully. We trust him, we look at it very carefully, and we see it's only a rope. So it doesn't matter whether you think the I you're attending to is ego or you think it is self. It's all, there's only one I. It's the same I. It's the mind which gives these labels.
Excuse me?
Yes.
Is another way of saying attend to I to say be aware of being aware?
Yes, in a sense. But this thing of, it is. But what is it that is aware? More than being aware, being aware of what is being aware, of that which is being aware. Because, for example, I'm aware of these lights here. But by being aware of this light is not the problem, it's not the solution. Because so long as I'm aware of anything other than I, it is not the pure awareness. The pure awareness is only self-awareness, the awareness of I alone. So
is the I not awareness then?
It is awareness, but remember this word awareness we use in many, it is used in many different senses. Are you aware that Russia is the capital of Moscow is the capital of Russia?
Yes.
You are. So your awareness of the fact that Russia is the capital of Moscow, is that I? So
the awareness that knows is.
Exactly. So what knows that that is what is aware is what we need to investigate.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. Because we can use awareness or consciousness in the sense of what is aware or what is conscious. But generally, the usual way in which we use these words, it doesn't mean what is aware, but it means the knowledge we have of these things, rather than the one who knows these things. So we have to be very, very, it's very, I is something very, very subtle. And it's very easy for our attention to be deflected away from I. So we are trying, as it were, to hone our attention, focus our attention, center our attention on I alone. So we have to be very, very particular that it is only I we're attending to, not anything else. That's why generally Bhagavan stressed this knowing I. Who am I? What is this I? Because
it just gives a lot of less of a modern way of putting it, wouldn't it, if you could just think in those terms.
Well, what is more modern than I? We're all saying I.
Yes.
Since ancient times, and awareness, consciousness, they're not modern concepts. Philosophers have been talking about these things for thousands of years. They're there in the Vedas, and in all ancient philosophy you can find these stuff. So they're not new concepts. But the trouble is, most philosophy is investigating consciousness as if it's something other than I. Nowadays, there's a lot of interest in philosophy and in neuroscience and everything. They're trying to find out what is consciousness. And they have there are big journals written with papers on what is consciousness, and they have all sorts of theories. One theory is there's a hot theory of consciousness. The hot theory of consciousness is a higher order thought. The thought that thinks of a thought, that is consciousness. All sorts of ideas they have, and generally they're trying to reduce consciousness. How does consciousness arise in a physical form? They take the physical for granted, and they assume that this world was here before consciousness came into being. Only on this little planet in this vast universe, somehow life has evolved, or organisms evolved, and as they evolved higher and higher, suddenly consciousness popped up. They tried to understand how this is possible, because they're assuming that the physical is the basis. Whereas Bhagavan said, why should we assume physical is the basis? What we know about the physical world only because we experience it. So without I to experience it, there will be no knowledge of a physical world. So why should we assume I depends upon the physical world rather than the physical world depends on I? Yes, sorry.
Excuse me.
Yes.
But my English is not very good.
Okay, sorry, I'm speaking too fast.
Could you repeat how to investigate the I?
Okay.
How to investigate?
If I ask you to investigate what's in this bunch of flowers, what do? You peer inside it.
I could
So, yes. But we can't see I. It's not a physical thing like a flower. But when we look at this, what is going through our eye to this flower, so to speak? It's our attention. So we have to direct that attention. It is by whatever we attend to, we experience. So we are experiencing this world because we're attending to it. Instead of attending to anything else, attend only to I. Try to experience I alone. Because so long as you experience anything other than I, you are mixing yourself with adjuncts. So you're becoming the ego. If you want to experience I as it really is, you have to experience it in complete isolation from everything else. Is my English clear?
Yeah.
You understand isolation? You have to be complete. When scientists, supposing there's some herb is discovered in South American forest, but is a cure for cancer or for leukemia or for diabetes or something. What the scientists do, they try to isolate the active ingredient. So in science, in order to study anything, to really be sure that you're studying only one thing, you have to isolate it from everything else. So you have to avoid, because if you've got many things, if it could be one of many things, you don't really know what you're studying. So we've got to study this I alone. We have to isolate it from all the adjuncts with which it's now mixed. So we have to try and focus our attention on what is this I. That's all there is to it.
Finish that. Can I just go back to what you said about prayer?
Yeah.
I absolutely accept what you say that most prayer is a complete waste of time because God already knows what we want.
Yes.
We're trying to tell God his business.
Yes.
The only thing is about it, I go to Mass every morning and they chatter away prayers all the time.
Yes.
It's just one after another. But underneath it, there is a thread, more than a thread, a river of love.
Okay.
And I think prayer which focuses love, is valid.
Yeah. This is the path of bhakti.
Yes,
It's been explained very nicely by Sadhuwan in the second chapter of the second part of the path of Sri Ramana. What he explains is, when people start worshipping God, God is a means to an end. They want to achieve certain things. They believe God has the power to grant it. So they come to God basically with a shopping list. I want this, this and this. That is ātma-vicāra prayer. Praying for things for, I want to get a better job, I want to pass my exam, I want my sick grandmother to get better, this, that. It will seem that we are praying very selflessly when we're praying for our grandmother, but actually, it's because it's our grandmother. We're praying for the grandmother who's starving in Africa or some other part of the world. No, we pray for those who are near and dear to us. So in anything where we are requesting God for something, there's a ātma-vicāra element. But by doing that, the more we pray to God for this and for that, we will find at least some of our prayers, it will seem to us are answered. So then sooner or later, because we are often thinking about God, the thought will come to us, when God is so trying to answer my prayers, how much love he has for me, isn't it me asking him for this and that, rather than seeking God himself? If he's so loving that he's answering all my needs, then surely I should seek him rather than all these needs. He knows what my needs are, he will satisfy them. So we stop praying to God for this or that. We pray to God only for God's own sake. We want to come close to God, God becomes our desire. So that is the point at which the Kamya Bhakti becomes Nishkamya Bhakti. We are praying to God only for God. But even that is not the end, because we still take God to be other than ourselves. But the more we pray to God, worship God, whatever we do, meditate or whatever, that's all purifying our mind. It's freeing our mind from other attachments. And as our mind becomes purer, it will reach a point where it will be ready to receive the teaching from the Guru, which is, the God you're seeking is yourself. If you want to experience God, you have to experience yourself as you really are.
Yeah.
So that is where the Anya Bhakti, the Bhakti for God as if He's other, becomes Ananya Bhakti. This is very clearly explained by Bhagavan in Upadesha. In the first two verses, he says karma cannot give liberation. Then in the third verse he says, but if nishkarmya karma done with love for God, offering the fruit of, to God, that will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. He doesn't say that is the way to liberation. It will purify the mind and show the way to liberation. The way to liberation is only vichara. But by practicing bhakti towards God, by worshipping God nishkamya, without any desiring anything from God except God Himself, and then he explains there are different types of actions we can do. We can do puja, that is physically worshipping God. We can do japa, or singing stotras or things, that is verbally.
This is what we did in 40 verses.
Yeah, verbally worshipping God. Or we can just meditate on God, that is mentally worshipping Him. So he explains those in verses 4, 5, 6, 7. Then in verse 8, he says, rather than anya bhava, rather than meditating on God as if He's something other, ananya bhava, with the conviction that He is I. Ananya bhava means, when we meditate on ananya, means without otherness. So if we meditate on what is not other, that's only meditating on I. So the ananya bhava, in which it's understood He is I, there's no He other than I. In other words, what Bhagavan is describing there is self-attentiveness. That he says is annihilating ultimum. That is the highest of all. That means it's the highest of all forms of meditation, the highest of all forms of bhakti. Because that alone is the direct path to liberation. So it's not that prayer is useless, but I think any real devotee will understand that prayers aren't always answered. And if we've got a little bit of sense, we'll understand our prayers aren't always answered, and thank goodness they're not always answered. Because we ask all sorts of foolish things that we start to...
What it amounts to is that simply prayer as a form of bhakti,
as a form of bhakti, yeah.
is totally valid.
Yes, it is.
And excellent
Yes.
for once.
Yes, but it's still a roundabout way. After we come to Bhagavan and we learn from Bhagavan that the direct path is to investigate I, if we want to, Bhagavan says in Nanya, in Who Am I, those who have fallen, come within the glance of the Guru's grace will surely be saved, like the prey in the jaws of the tiger. And then he says, however, it's essential that we follow the path shown by the Guru. The path shown by our Guru is only vichara. He has said all these other things, these are ways to come to the path of vichara.
But he didn't say that it wasn't vichara, he said that the other way is bhakti. I mean, you can find God in total love. God is love. That's where God is.
But it's God other than yourself.
Yes.
God is other than yourself.
Of course.
Then his love for you is imperfect. Because if he is other than you, he's loving you as someone other than himself. So he's loving himself, surely. We all love ourselves. So he's loving himself and he's giving a little bit of his love to you. I'm not satisfied with such a God. I'm only satisfied with the God Bhagavan has shown, who is my own self, Because that God loves me as my own self. In fact, He loves me much better than I love myself, because I love myself as this ego. He loves me as I really am. So isn't that a much better God?
Yes.
So if we want to know that God, we have to attend to ours.
Okay.
I can, excuse me.
Yes.
Yeah. And the attention to the attention is...
Attention to be a tender.
attention
To-
to the attention.
A tender. Who is attending? It's I. So it's attention to be I that is attending.
Okay.
In other words, we're turning our attention back on ourselves. What is attention? Attention is our own awareness. We direct our awareness, as it were, to things, or we bring things into the centre of our awareness. We don't actually send our awareness out there. We draw things into the centre of our awareness as we attend to them. Instead of bringing anything else into the centre of our awareness, what is always in the centre of our awareness, we're aware of only that. That is I.
Then the attender is the I.
The attender is the I, yes.
In the technique of the inquiry, would you say something about the gathering of attention? Or isn't that necessary?
Well, we're always gathering attention. Whenever when we read an email, we gather our attention and focus on that email, don't we? Whatever we attend to, we take our attention away from other things and put it on that one thing. So when our aim is to attend only to I, by putting our whole attention on I, automatically we're gathering it from everything else. We're withdrawing it from
So
everything
it's a
else.
form of concentration.
Yes, yes.
I want to ask about this technique of Mahayoga, diving into the heart.
That book, Technique of Mahayoga, that is a very, very misleading book.
That explains various forms of meditation.
It does, but that is not.
diving into
It
the heart
doesn't.
of
It explains many things, but it doesn't explain what Bhagavan's teachings are. The title itself is misleading because Mahayoga. It has not, that technique of Mahayoga was not written by Lakshman Sharma. It has nothing to do with Lakshman Sharma. Lakshman Sharma, who wrote Who Am I? Who wrote Mahayoga, the book Mahayoga, was written by who was a good devotee of Bhagavan. He called his book Mahayoga because once Bhagavan said, when there was some talk about yoga, Bhagavan said, this is the greatest of all yogas. This is Mahayoga, talking about vichara. So in Bhagavan's terminology, Mahayoga means only vichara. But what is explained in that book, the technique of Mahayoga, is everything but vichara. He explains about, I can't remember, it's many, many years since I read it, but he explains about some sort of imaginative process of diving into the heart or something. When we shouldn't always, no words can adequately describe what is vichara. Because words describe things. We cannot actually, no words can adequately describe what is vichara. So Bhagavan often used figurative terms. One of the figurative terms he used was diving. He used the analogy, for example, in Who Am I, Nanya, just as like a pearl diver who dives down to a depth of the ocean to get the pearl, so we should dive within ourselves to get the pearl of Atma. Their diving doesn't mean like plunging into water. It means subsiding, sinking. So when the mind sinks, how the mind is to sink, how the ego is to sink, it is only by attending to itself. But in that book, Technique of Mahayoga, it's as if there's some sort of, it's an imaginative process, it's the bhavana, what he's describing. And I think he also talks about the heart on the right-hand side, talks about watching the breath, all sorts of things he talks about. One thing he doesn't talk about is simple self-attention. So though that book has been around for a very long time, it's been misleading many people. Fortunately, most people, they don't read only that book, they read other books, and they understand, oh, this book is a bit...
But since it has been published by Ramana,
many things have been published, but I'll tell you a story. If you want to know the value of being published by Ramana, I'll tell you a story. When Lakshman Sharma first came to Bhagavan, Lakshman Sharma, who wrote the book Mahayoga, not the book Technique of Mahayoga, when he first came to Bhagavan, Bhagavan had just recently written Uludunaptu. So Bhagavan asked him, have you read Uludunaptu? And he said, Bhagavan, I'm a student of Sanskrit. I'm not so good in Tamil. But if you can explain to me, I'd very much like to study Uludunaptu. The reason he said that, you're probably aware of it, other people may not be, from the 1830s or 40s, there was a British education policy which was that all schools should teach English. And in addition to English, you could either study your mother tongue or you can study Sanskrit. I don't know about in other parts of India, but in South India, particularly in Tamil Nadu, this had the effect all Brahmins chose to study Sanskrit. Not all, but I mean most Brahmins, I'd say, chose to study Sanskrit. Most non-Brahmins chose to study Tamil. Before that policy was brought in by Lord Macaulay, all educated people in Tamil Nadu, whether they're Brahmins or non-Brahmins, they studied both Tamil and Sanskrit, and so the two languages were nicely blended together. And someone who is learned in one language will be equally learned in the other language. But because this split had been made, a lot of Brahmins had studied Sanskrit. Though their mother tongue is Tamil, they really don't understand Tamil literature. Because Tamil is a classical language like Sanskrit. So for many Tamilians, it's difficult to understand classical Tamil. So Lakshman Sharma was one of being a Brahmin. He had opted at school to study Sanskrit. So he wasn't familiar with literary Tamil, with classical Tamil. And Bhagavan wrote in the style of classical Tamil. So he had difficulty understanding Uludunaptu. So Bhagavan began to explain to him the meaning of Uludunaptu. And because he liked Sanskrit and he liked writing verses in Sanskrit, Lakshman Sharma began writing verses. And he showed the verses to Bhagavan, and Bhagavan suggested some corrections. And after he had gone through it once, he decided to revise it again. So he again asked Bhagavan to explain the meaning again, and again he rewrote it. 2 or 3 times he wrote it in different meters. Then while this process was going on, one day Kapali Sastri, who was a disciple of Kaviganta, and who by that time had gone and joined Aurobindo Ashram, he was on a visit from Pondicherry on his way to Sirsi, which is where Kaviganta was then living. And when he came to the ashram, other followers of Kaviganta said, this person, Lakshman Sharma, is writing a translation of Uludunaptu in Sanskrit. So since you're a great scholar, you should check it. So he read it, and he said to Bhagavan, Bhagavan, I think this should be shown to Kaviganta. I'm going there now, can I have a copy of it? So he duly made a copy of it, and he went away. A few weeks later, Kaviganta wrote a letter to the manager of Ramanashram saying, perceiving the restriction of my hand in correcting Lakshman Sharma's version, I am going to make my own version. And a few weeks later, he sent his corrected version, his own version, which he stole the name. The name Satdarshan originally belonged to Lakshman Sharma's version, but he stole that name and completely new context. He sent it along with another letter to Bhagavan saying, please ask the ashram manager not to print this yet because Kapali is writing a commentary on it. So a few weeks later, Kapali had finished his commentary in Sanskrit. He himself translated it into Tamil. Vishwanathan translated it into Tamil. All 3 versions, the English, Sanskrit and Tamil versions, were sent to the ashram. At that time, the ashram was only just beginning to do its own publication. Previously, publications were done by other devotees. So, Chinnaswami had just become Sarvadhikari. Sarvadhikari means emperor, the ruler of all, the dictator of the whole Ramana ashram. So he's given himself this title Self-enquiry. Everything has to be, so publications also have to be by Ramana ashram. So 3 books come in English, Tamil and Sanskrit. Very good opportunity. He happily sends it off to the press for printing. And within a few months of this, it was 3 books were printed in these 3 languages. And when Lakshman Sharma next came to Bhagavan, Bhagavan said, "You'll be very interested to read this Darshan Bhashya." And so Lakshman Sharma started to read it. He was horrified by what was in it. It's not only the translation was a complete mistranslation of Urdu Napadu, many important ideas were omitted or subtly twisted, but the commentary was directly against Bhagavan's teaching. For example, in one place, in the introduction that Kapali Sastri writes, he gives his own arguments against the Vada, that's the doctrine of false appearance taught by Shankara, and he says, therefore it is false and futile to say that Brahman alone is real and the world is unreal. In other words, he's saying Bhagavan's teachings are false and futile. This book was published in 1931, I think it was, by Ramana ashram. In 2014, it's still being published by Ramana ashram. It's still that same sentence is there, it's false and futile. But nobody questions it. Well, some people questioned it, Sadhguru questioned it. Why, how, this is you agree to this, and they, oh no, it was published in Bhagavan's lifetime. Lakshman Sharma also questioned it. When he saw this, he asked Bhagavan, Bhagavan, if you allow such books to be published by your ashram in your lifetime, won't people in future say that you've approved this? Bhagavan said, according to the purity of the antakarana, that's according to the purity of the mind, the same teaching reflects in different ways. If you think you can write a better commentary, you write your own commentary. Then Lakshman Sharma wrote his Tamil commentary on Uludanapi, and he also wrote Mahayoga with many of the same ideas in it. Bhagavan later said, but the ashram, Chinnaswami, because he didn't like Lakshman Sharma, because Lakshman Sharma was a friend of Murugan, and Chinnaswami didn't like Murugan, he refused to publish this. So Lakshman Sharma, who had his own printing press in Pudukkottai, he printed it. And after it was printed and copies were received, Bhagavan one day went and he stood outside the window of the office, just behind Chinnaswami's desk. Bhagavan was just standing there. Someone in the office noticed and told Chinnaswami, Bhagavan's behind you. Chinnaswami looked around, and Bhagavan said to him, everyone is saying this book is the best commentary on Uludanapi. Why don't you print it? And yes, Bhagavan, certainly I'll print it. Since then it became an ashram publication. So that was also published by Ramana ashram.
Is that the Mahayoga? Is that the Mahayoga?
No, that is his Tamil commentary on Uludanapi. He afterwards, about the same time, he wrote Mahayoga, which is not exactly written as a commentary, but it covers much of the same material.
So Darshana Bhashya is not authoritative.
Well, if you agree it's false and futile to say that Brahman alone is real and the world is unreal, then it's very authoritative. But Bhagavan has said, according to the purity of the antakarana, the same teaching reflects in a different way. Some people read Darshan Bhashya and they're fully satisfied. This is Bhagavan's teaching. Because they are not able to grasp any further.
This gave us a lot of trouble. We've been studying the 40 verses, a group of us.
Yes.
And we had the Sub-Darshana Bhashya.
Yes.
One of our commentaries.
Yes.
And we had great difficulty in making sense of it.
Yes, well, yes. Because it is actually... one thing Bhagavan said to Lakshman Sharma when after all this happened, when Lakshman Sharma, when Kaviganta's translation was first received by the ashram in manuscript form, Lakshman Sharma read it, and it's written in beautiful Sanskrit. So he said to Bhagavan, oh, this is beautiful. Bhagavan said, begin revising your own version in a longer meter. See how many ideas go through it carefully, see how many ideas are omitted. See how things are twisted. Then Bhagavan began to explain to him. Bhagavan told him they hated Advaita like poison. And Bhagavan told him a story. A few years before, there was a person called Pranavananda. He was actually the uncle of Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan. And he was the Munshi who brought F.H. Humphreys to Bhagavan. He was previously a householder, and he had become a sannyasi under the name Pranavananda. He was fluent in both Telugu and Tamil. So when Nanya came out, he translated Nanya into Telugu. And he showed it to Kavyaganta. Kavyaganta read it, and he said, I never thought Bhagavan would be guilty of partiality. I do not like this at all. Take it away. Bhagavan himself told this story to Lakshman Sharma. So though many books say he's the foremost disciple of Bhagavan, actually he hated Bhagavan's teachings because Bhagavan's teachings are about turning within. Whereas his interest, he had so many ambitions. He wanted to establish the Vedic Dharma in India, and even to conquer the whole world, to establish Vedic Dharma throughout the world. He had so many ambitions. And he thought that by mantra Shakti he could do all these things. Which is why he was so interested in Siddhis and Shakti and all these things. So naturally he's not going to translate Urudnaptu as it is. Kapali Sastri is belonging to a saying that he also doesn't like Advaita at all. So they twist it.
Interesting.
Yes. So, because the book is published by Ramanashram, doesn't mean it is the Bible. Because ashram is there, they run the institution, they're administrators, but they don't know what Bhagavan's teachings are. If you try to explain to them, see, Lakshman Sharma says this, Kapali Sastri says this, and ask them which is correct, they won't know because they don't know what Bhagavan's teachings are. But they know, who am I, yes, Bhagavan's teaching is who am I. But there's who am I is the whole of Bhagavan's teaching, but to understand what that who am I means, it takes a lot of you. You really have to be passionate about understanding really what Bhagavan is saying. Otherwise, if we get everything that's printed in all the books, as I say, if you read talks, there are many good things in talks, but there are many things in talks which seem to completely contradict what Bhagavan says in other places. Partly because the recording is not so good, and partly because Bhagavan, when he's talking to people, when he's answering questions, he answers according to individual needs. I don't have that qualification, so whatever anyone asks me, I just go on about I, because that's all I know. But Bhagavan was able to see into the heart of people. He knew what they needed, and he gave them accordingly. But for those who came to him with a clean slate, who just wanted to know, to learn what he wanted to teach, he said the only way is vichara. The only goal is to experience yourself as you really are.
Well, thank you, Michael, for the interesting revelation. Yes,
we're just discussing, obviously everything is the time.
Yes.
And there's nothing outside. But is there any difference between consciousness and awareness? Because you can be conscious with thoughts, but aware without thoughts?
Well, we can give any meaning we want to words. Essentially, awareness and consciousness mean the same. But what they each mean does depend upon the context in which they're being used. So, words are not really the issue. No words can actually capture what we are talking about. In a sense, the words are pointers, and we have to understand what the words are pointing to. But words themselves don't matter, which words we choose to use, whether we choose to use awareness or consciousness. As far as I'm concerned, it makes no difference. Yeah. And whatever, if we try to give a separate meaning to awareness and a separate meaning to consciousness, we can't expect everyone else to attribute the same meaning, the same distinction. So I think it's best to make no distinction between the two words.
So would you
But-
use awareness?
Either awareness or consciousness. Either.
It's just the same.
It's the same, yes. I am aware, I am conscious. What difference does it make?
Right, yeah.
Doesn't consciousness imply a kind of a more background thing, and awareness is more like being aware of specific things? I don't know. It seems to have a slightly.
It can sometimes, but it very much depends on context. There's no word that will perfectly capture what we mean. One thing I often stress in talking about consciousness or awareness, in Bhagavan's teachings, the sense in which we use the word consciousness or awareness means what is conscious or what is aware. In other words, I. Whereas generally when people use these words, it doesn't refer to the I that is aware, but it refers to the condition of I being aware of something or being conscious of something. But it's the I that is aware, that is what we're interested in.
Michael, do you ever get stressed out? You strike me as being, one of the very few people I've met who are actually living the teachings rather than just talking about them. And I just wonder, because you come here, you're surrounded by people, they don't even leave you alone in tea or anything like that, and it doesn't seem to bother you.
Well, I'm certainly not. I'm certainly not immune to getting stressed out. I don't usually get stressed out. I suppose I had quite a good training living in Tiruvannamalai, because there I lived a completely open life. People were just dropping in all times of day. People would come and stay with me. They'd just be sleeping. I'd be sleeping on the floor. They'd sleep on the floor beside me. So from the years I was living in Tiruvannamalai, I'm quite used to living quite an open life. So I suppose that was some sort of training for me, but
the Indians do that anyway.
Yeah, I know, so it's no big deal.
So, do Indian people get less stressed out than people do in the West?
Well, stress ultimately stress is our response to a situation.
Yes.
If we are totally centered in I, even in the midst of a battlefield we can be centered in I.
Yes.
But I've never been in a battlefield, fortunately, but I'm sure if I was in a battlefield I'd be pretty stressed out by it. So I don't think I'm immune to stress. But I suppose I tend not to get stressed out so easily, I suppose. But I don't think I cannot even say that's a result of any practice or anything. I think some people just do tend to get more stressed out than others. But I think particularly once we come to Bhagavan's line, at least we understand, at least theoretically, whatever is happening as it's meant to happen. And there's not much we can do, well, according to Bhagavan, there's nothing we can do to change it. How much we try to change things, they don't change. So the only thing we can change is our response to things. So I think and I don't even claim that I talk a lot about this practice of vichara. I don't claim to be a great practitioner or anything. I'm still struggling as much as anyone else is. But at least by the little I try to be watchful of I suppose that little bit of practice that I do does, in a sense, make it easier not to get stressed by things. But as I say, as far as practice is concerned, I may understand the theory, but it's one thing to understand the theory, it's another thing to actually put it into practice. And part of the reason why I love to talk about this subject I don't know whether it enthuses anyone else, but it enthuses me. More than anything else, I'm encouraging myself to try and persevere in this practice. So it's for purely selfish reasons. I talk about Bhagavan teachings, write about Bhagavan teachings, because if I don't, my mind will be hit all over the place.
Are you God?
What?
Are you God?
Am I God? If you mean, is this little person, Michael, sitting in a chair here God? I don't think so. But if you mean the reality that is inside each one of us, yes, it is God. The I in each one of us is God. But that is the I separated from the person that we now seem to be, the pure I. The I in absolute isolation from everything else. That is God. Because we can understand it in a simple way. If we accept God is infinite, there can be nothing other than God. Because if there's anything other than God, that's limiting God. There's God plus Michael. So Michael is thereby limiting God. So unless God includes Michael, he's not infinite. So everything is included in God. But
even the ego then?
Even the ego, yes. In fact, the ego is the closest point of our contact with God. Because the ego is a mixture of the pure I, which is God, and all these adjuncts. So if we want to find God, it's only inside this ego that we can find God. Because so long as we're looking out, we're seeing things other than ourselves, so we cannot see God. Because God cannot be other than ourselves. Yes?
What role has grace to play?
What?
Grace.
Grace?
Yes. You can't merge with the self without grace. Is that true?
What is... If God wants to be really kind to us, what is the kindest thing he can do to us is to be always with us, to be always inside us, to be always shining in us as I. That is the greatest of all graces, isn't it?
But he's in there anyway.
That is always there. Grace is constant. Grace is always available. But the thing is, we are like a person standing in a river complaining we're thirsty when we ask for grace. Because the grace is abundantly available, but we obstruct the flow of grace. By rising as an ego, we are obstructing the flow of grace, so to speak. We can never completely obstruct it, but we seem to be obstructing it. By turning our attention out towards the world, taking interest in the world, we are resisting the grace which is trying to draw us back within.
So how would you define grace? Would you be able to define grace?
Grace is the pure I shining in the heart of each one of us. But we all love to ignore that I because we're so interested in everything else. So when we take interest in anything, we are ignoring grace. When we take interest in I alone, then only we are opening our heart to grace. Yes.
You talked about between two thoughts, there's a gap.
Yes.
And that thing has helped me very, very much.
Right.
Because I think there's like a technique.
Yes.
Because you have something to focus on. But is this gap between two thoughts like that is attending to I?
Well, the gap between two thoughts, when we talk of it as a gap, it is relative to the two thoughts between which it occurs. But what is in that gap is what we're interested in. When in the gap between two thoughts, that means thoughts have subsided, what remains is the base, which is I. So it can be a useful clue but we should remember it's a clue only to... we shouldn't be looking for a gap as such. We should be looking for I, and the more we attend to I, the more our thoughts will subside, and the more we'll be in that, we will be that gap between the thoughts, or we will be in that gap between the thoughts.
Is it like vichara?
It is vichara, yes, yes. But we shouldn't take, if we take, it's very easy to objectify these things. If we're looking for a gap as if it's something other than ourselves, where all thoughts subside, what remains? I. So that I is the gap is nothing but I. But that I is there even when the thoughts are there. But the thoughts are, so to speak, it's like a cloud covering the sun. The sun is always shining there. Sometimes the clouds are there. Sometimes there is a gap between the clouds. The sun shines brightly. It's like that. But we are not... we're interested in the gap because we can see the sun through the gap. So it's the sun we are interested in, not the gap itself.
Isn't the gap an indication of silence? Isn't that an indication of
Yes, if it's a gap between two thoughts, that means there are no thoughts there.
Yes.
Thoughts are the antithesis of silence. So where all thoughts subside, but we don't actually experience, when we talk of a gap between two thoughts, it's relative. Because so long as there's a thought rising on either side of the gap, any thought, the base of any thought is the ego. So there must be, the ego is still existing there. So when we experience ourselves as we really are, it's not even a gap between two thoughts, because in that state, even the first thought doesn't exist. Even the thought I is not present there. So the gap between two thoughts is like a doorway. Again, all these are just, I mean, these are clues, but we shouldn't attach too much importance to a clue. We should go beyond the clue to what it's pointing to. Ultimately, it's I that we're looking for, and it's I that we experience most clearly when other thoughts, to the extent other thoughts subside, to that extent we experience I clearly. So, did I answer your question about grace satisfactorily, or well, I felt you weren't entirely satisfied?
Well, yes and no, yes and no. Because it strikes me that an element of grace, now, the way you spoke about grace, is there anyway.
Yes, okay. Let's take it, we can approach it from a different way. Grace is the love that God has for us, isn't it?
Well, if you say so, yes.
Well, do you think grace is something other than God's love? Do you think God's love and His grace are two separate things?
It's grace batting for you. Sorry, God batting for you.
Yes.
That's how I see grace.
Okay.
So
Isn't He always batting for us?
It facilitates. Yes, but this is a special batting. This is because you're not always. You don't have access to grace at all times, do you?
Well.
Oh, I don't.
Okay. Well, no, in fact, you do. The thing is, when we turn our attention outward, we are, so to speak, obstructing the flow of grace. We are in the river, but instead of drinking the water, we are putting our head above the water. So it seems we're not able to drink the water, but it's only we who choose to put our head above the water rather than drink it. So it's of our own volition, it's our will opposing the will of God. The will of God is that our ego should subside. But it's our will that we should rise and take interest in this world. So we have to surrender our will to God. Then we will experience His grace in all its fullness.
How would you define surrender? How do you see surrender? What is surrender?
self-surrender. It is surrender of ourself to God. Our self means our finite self, our ego, surrendering our ego to God.
In other words, it's either acceptance of everything or lack of resistance.
Yes, not reacting to things. Because what is reacting? It's our ego. The more our ego subsides, the less we will react to things, the less we will resist anything.
So, acceptance of the unacceptable, so to speak.
Yes, you can say that. It is unacceptable for the ego because God or grace is experienced in its fullness where the ego subsides. And for the ego, its own subsidence is, its own annihilation is unacceptable.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Yes.
Question
Yes.
to back.
So I just, I wanted just two related questions, based on your experience and personal observation. Of course, we could say that, the idea of progress or process in itself could be considered an illusion, but that aside, if we are making progress towards, say, looking at the eye or going within, is it true that, at some point there's a stronger push to go outside, a stronger resistance? So it's not a linear sort of progress path, as it were. And the second question related to that is if that is so, or whatever your response to that is, what's the role of the guru in that, as a guiding force? If it's not linear, perhaps it gets harder or easier, or whatever, it's a bumpy road, and maybe he has a role to play in that.
Okay, I think we can use an analogy to try and answer at least the first part of your question. If you have a balloon, it's been blown up with air, you try to push it beneath the water. The more you try to push it beneath, the more the resistance for it to come up. But if you persevere in trying and trying and trying, slowly the air will leak out of that balloon. And it will become easier and easier to push it in. Once all the air has gone out, it will sink down by itself. Our ego is a bit like that. Now our ego is a fully blown balloon. We're so interested in this world, in all of it, our life in this world, all the nice things we can experience outside. We resist a lot when we try to turn within. It's like trying to push the fully blown balloon. But if we persevere in this practice, as taught by Bhagavan, slowly, the balloon, the air will leak out of the balloon. It will become softer and softer, easier and easier to push in, until eventually, once all the desires and attachments have been squeezed out of this ego, it will sink of its own accord down to the bottom of the heart.
So that gives me a lot of hope on my experience that sometimes those latent tendencies are
definitely. Bhagavan said it is natural, but when you try to attend to I, all sorts of thoughts will rise. It's natural and it's also necessary, because only if they rise, you can cut them off at their root. So by persevering more and more, whatever forces drive us to come out again, we should turn back within. By doing this, we weaken the outward-going tendency of the mind, that's the Vishaya vasanas, and we strengthen the Satvasana, that is the vasana just to be, to subside within. And as for Guru's part in this, Guru, as someone outside us, his role is to give us this teaching, which he's done. Now he's withdrawn his outward form, but he has said he will always be present, because he's always within us as I. So, just as the outward form of the Guru by his words pushed us within, that inward Guru, Bhagavan in the form of I, is constantly pulling our mind within. So we just have to yield to him.
Do you want to say something?
Can I ask a question which sort of follows? To what extent is the ego simply karma? I mean, you know, one sort of arrived at one's particular ego for karmic reasons, but which go back in this life and previous life.
Who has done all the karma?
Precisely, the ego has.
The ego, yes.
So our ego is karma.
It is the doer of the karma, and it is fed by its karma. Any action we do, all action entails attention to something other than I. If you're attending only to I, that is a state of perfect stillness, silence. When our attention moves out towards anything else, that is from that point all karma begins. So every karma, whatever we feel we are doing, it entails our attending to something other than I. So that is feeding the ego. So
well, it's all this sort of attending to something other than I, which has resulted in the screwed upness of the ego, which is what.
Yes, that is what Bhagavan said. Urupattu undu mekongam. That is grasping form, feeding on those forms. It swells up this ego. So karma we are doing is feeding the ego. That is why karma can never be a means to annihilating the ego. The ego can only be annihilated in the state of perfect stillness.
We wouldn't have karma unless we had ego.
No, of course not, certainly not. Because the karma is only for the ego. Bhagavan says in verse 38 of Navdu, he said, if we are a doer of actions, we will have to experience the resulting fruit. But when we know ourselves by investigating who is the doer of actions, in other words, who am I, we will, all doership will be destroyed, and all the three karmas will vanish. Implication, the ego will vanish. One thing Bhagavan often used to say, whatever we think about ourselves, whether we think we're proud or we think we're humble, whether we think we're good, we think we're bad, it's all ego. Because I am this or that is ego. I am alone is the reality. Yes.
Just a little thing. I heard Krishnamurti once said that if you look at the word alone,
yes,
it says all one.
Yes. Yes.
That's worth coming for.
Yes.
Do you mean that nothing else is?
Sure. He's the catalyst.
He's the catalyst. Yes.
Okay, the man was mentioning how if there is no path, should we all just give up? Because we just want to go somewhere where we really are. And then like we're trying to act to achieve a goal, but am I supposed to act without the goal in mind?
Well, I think we all have some goal. Everyone out on the street has some goal. Whether it's to go and eat a pizza or whether it's to earn $1 million, or we all have even the little ant has a goal to carry that big piece of sugar back to its nest. So we're all driven by we all have some goal. We all there's something which is impelling us towards something. But the problem is most of us have chosen wrong goals. Bhagavan has told us our problems will not cease so long as this ego is still around. So long as we experience ourselves as this ego, we will have problems. Whatever we may achieve in our life, we will not be satisfied. So the goal we if we accept what Bhagavan teaches us, the goal we try to set for ourselves is to make this ego subside, to annihilate this ego.
But the ego is tied up to all striving for things, is it not? I always think the ego as winning or thinking or doing.
Yes.
Every time I'm doing something, it's the ego wanting, winning something to happen.
Exactly. So anything we do is just feeding the ego. But if we, instead of doing something, if we just watch this ego, just try to attend to this I. What is this I? The ego will subside. All doing will come to an end.
Yeah, I think I understand.
Well, I don't think any of us understand, because we will understand fully only when we succeed in what we're doing. We're trying. But we understand the theory a little bit. But the real understanding comes only when this ego has subsided and we experience what remains but in the absence of the ego, which is what we really are. That is, what remains is what we really are, not the ego.
I think there are a lot of linguistic, semantic problems that come up a lot because of the overuse of this word ego, actually. I mean, even if you look at it, the word ego in Latin also simply means I.
Yes.
Now, I noticed that, even in this room this afternoon, people have used the word ego to mean about 18 different things. So, even suppose I took the word chair, and when I say chair, I mean chair. Someone else in this room says chair and means window. Someone else says chair means light.
Right.
When people talk about ego,
okay,
the one thing is, I think often they simply mean the sort of unpleasant part of themselves.
Yes.
They don't necessarily want to become conscious of.
That's why I said in my little introductory talk, I said when Bhagavan talks about ego, he's not just talking about pride or arrogance or any of these qualities that we often associate with ego. He's talking about the root of all these problems, which is the I itself. I mean, ego is a good word, but as you say, in Latin it means just I. But in the sense in which the word is used in the English language, it doesn't mean the pure I. It means what I take myself to be. The Tamil word that Bhagavan used most often, sometimes he used the word ahankara, but ahankara tends to mean more ego in the sense of pride. The word he used most often was ahande, which is a Tamil, that is, in Tamil some of the Sanskrit sounds get slightly modified. The original word in Sanskrit is ahanta. Ta means ness, so it means I-ness. So it's the I-ness in
sense of being I.
Yes.
Right.
But it is the sense of being I. The I-ness that we attribute to things other than the pure I.
Sure.
In other words, to the body and everything. That is what ego we're concerned about. That's why I say, Bhagavan isn't concerned with the symptoms. Yeah. He's only concerned with the disease. We all have desire, we all have fear, we all have so many things. All these problems we come with, they're all symptoms. Yeah. But these are all symptoms of what? They're symptoms of ego, the I, the limited I. So in order to get rid of all these symptoms, we have to get rid of a cause. And the only way to get rid of a cause is to investigate it, because it has no substantial existence of its own. If it's investigated, it subsides and disappears. Because it seems to exist only so long as it's attending to anything other than itself. When it tries to attend to itself, because it is formless, it merges in the formless source.
So then all it requires then is this identification in a way with the I and body or mind.
Yes, but how do we disidentify with that? The only way to disidentify with it, so long as we're attending to body, mind or anything else, the identification is there. Sure. The only way to break this identification is to attend to the I itself and then everything else will drop off and we'll come to a pure I. That is what is called the subsidence of the ego.
Which is actually extremely easy.
It is extremely easy. Why it seems to be difficult is because we don't really want it. We are still more...
Exactly.
What all Bhagavan asks us to do, experience I alone. Are we ready to experience I alone? No, I still want to experience this, experience that, but we have so much interest in our life in this world, in the external things. We are not yet ready to be interested only in I. If we are interested only in I, that is the supreme bhakti, the supreme love.
Is that the plot that suffering, for example, then plays? Suffering ripens one up
Yes,
to get ready to experience yourself.
exactly.
So then actually, if one suffers, one should be thankful for one suffering.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Bhagavan once said, the problem with us, we all thank God for the good things that happen to us. We forget to thank Him for the bad things. The bad things are as much as great as the good things.
Can one ever experience the pure I?
The ego cannot. The ego cannot experience the pure I. So when you say, can one, if by one if you mean the ego, no it can't. Because when it tries to experience the pure I, it disappears. And what remains is only the pure I can experience the pure I. For that, the impure I has to step aside. By trying to experience the pure I, we cease to be the impure I, and we remain as the pure I which is always experiencing itself.
Can you get into that for a short time, or is it a one-off?
So long as we're talking about time, is time I? Time is something other than I.
Right.
So the time exists only for the ego.
Yes. So my question is.
Actually, we need only one split second of clear self-experience, and everything comes to an end, including time.
Are you speaking from experience?
No. Theoretical knowledge. If I was speaking from experience, I wouldn't be speaking. Those who have seen don't speak. Those who speak haven't seen.
Did Bhagavan think highly of the Chinese?
What?
That's from the Tao Te Ching, isn't it?
Is it? Maybe, yes. But I think the same wisdom tends to be, wisdom isn't prerogative of any particular culture or religion or anything.
So someone told you that it's you only need to experience for an infinitesimal.
Yes.
And that's it.
Well, that's what Bhagavan says, but it's also reasonable. We only need to see for a moment that the snake is actually a rope, and we can never again see it as a snake. We can understand, oh, I mistook that to be the head, that to be the tail. We can imagine how we mistook it to be a rope, a snake. But once we know it's a rope, we can never make the same mistake again. So when we just for one moment experience ourselves as we really are, we can never again make the mistake of experiencing ourselves to be anything else.
But when that's a good, you say that's a good metaphor or example. But in one respect, it isn't a good example because the rope is at least something that we can latch onto. But what you're talking about, the eye, is not.
No analogy can be perfect. It is useful for explanatory purposes. We can use it to illustrate, for illustrative purposes, it's very useful. But, any analogy has its limitations.
Because it's the ego.
Yes, yes.
Michael, do you meditate? Regularly, how would you have a sort of meditation slot in the morning?
Well, I don't think routines. Our mind won't go to I according to the clock. There has to be a love there in order to attain to I. But when time permits, I like to, when I wake up in the morning, not just jump out of bed. I like to spend some time. I find that's quite a good time for trying to focus on I. But we shouldn't leave our practice only to the times when we are meditating, so-called meditating, because I is always with us, even in the midst, even when we are travelling by bus or walking along the road or doing so many things. If we think of it, from the moment we wake up in the morning to the time we go to sleep at night, we think about so many things. How many of those thoughts that we have during the day are really necessary? Some thoughts may be necessary in order to keep our body, to keep body and soul together, so to speak. Some thoughts are necessary, but I think probably at least 99% of the thoughts we have are totally unnecessary. So if all that time when we spend thinking unnecessary thoughts, if we spend that time attending to I, we could spend a considerable amount of our time during the day attending to I. But to do that, it requires great love. You have to be really, really interested in experiencing only I, then only it's possible to do so. I have to admit for myself, I don't yet have, well, I don't have that love. And so I persevere trying to practice it with the confidence that by practicing this, that love will slowly be generated, cultivated. But coming back to your question about a routine, I don't think some people find it useful to set aside a time for this, but generally speaking, I don't think it is too useful. Because during that time, if I have a half-hour slot in the morning or evening when I'm going to sit and meditate, at that time my mind may be interested in thinking so many other things. I can't just manufacture the interest to attend to I. So it's better, rather than a stretch of meditation, many, many small attempts to turn to I during the day, it all adds up.
I agree with you on the whole, but if I may be slightly personal, I do sort of have a regular slot when I get up in the morning, because as you say, Bhagavan said, one of the first things you need to do as you wake up is to catch hold of the I thought and keep the I current with you throughout the day if you can, insofar as you can.
Yeah.
Now, I'm no good at doing that. I can never catch the I thought. I can never remember to do it. They say that it's better if you meditate the night before, because then you wake up sort of focusing on the right thing.
Yeah.
But the nearest I can get to it is to sort of allot myself a certain length of time. And very often, it doesn't work properly. I mean, one's thoughts are all over the place, and it's a complete waste of time. But nevertheless, if you persist and keep on trying to sort of get back into it, I've personally found that an extremely useful discipline.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's fine. I mean, we each have to find what works for us.
Yeah. Yes, that's
yeah.
what I'm asking.
Do you think that in the investigation into the I, that the use of prana with the concentration is a help?
When you say using prana, that means part of our attention is on the prana, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it is. I mean, you take a deep breath and then see how far you go into the I.
Okay.
Is that a help, the prana there?
If you find it helpful, but yeah, if I mean, we can try all sorts of things. It's an investigation. It's experimentation. We have to try and find what works for us. But some things which initially may seem helpful can later become a distraction. Like one thing that many people say they find helpful is to, when they sit down to meditation, to watch their breath for a while, because that calms the mind down.
Yes.
The problem with that is, it may help at first, but once we get in the habit of watching the breath, when we're trying to attend to I, our attention will easily slip on, the breath will become a distraction for us. So, my own experience is, it's best to focus on the I, not to look for aids, things that will aid us. Because those aids will become a distraction. That's my own experience, but I mean, as I say, we each have to find what works for us. And we may find something works for us at one time, and later on we find an obstacle, we then have to ditch it. We always have to remember our only aim is attending to I. If something helps us, fine. If it becomes an obstacle, ditch it.
Thank you.
Bhagavan said different things to different people. He said to somebody that meditation is for mere beginners.
Yeah, that is talking about meditation in the sense of meditating on something other than I.
Wouldn't life be really boring if we were focused on the I all the time?
Who would be bored?
The idea of Leela and the dance, the play of form, the people, like my son, before a Norwich City, and I don't really care who wins, I just like going there because I enjoy just watching the game.
Yes.
But I really enjoy him getting wrapped up in the game.
Yes.
And I think it'd be really boring if we didn't get wrapped up in the game.
Yes. Okay. That's fine as far as outward things are concerned, but that cannot be the aim of life, just getting wrapped up in a game or getting wrapped up in this or that, because the one thing that is certain, we know this life we live in this body, it's only for a few years we're in this body, and those few years go by very, very quickly. I think as we get older, when we're young, it seems our life seems to stretch far ahead of us. As we get older, we realize how quickly it's gone past. So this life is short. We don't want to go out as we came in, as it were. We want to be at least have something more than just coming and going. So, we can do research on so many things in this world, but whatever knowledge we acquire of this world, we will lose it when we die. We lose it every night when we go to sleep, comes back the next morning. Once this body dies, right, I may have a PhD in astrophysics, I may be, what's the name, Hawkins, the scientist, they know so much about so many things. One day life is going to go, and then all the knowledge goes with it. But there's one thing that we can make research on, which will come with us, that is I. So if we make research on that I, that is surely the most important thing to make research on. It may seem boring at first, but that is because of our interest in other things. But the more we practice attending to this I, the more we practice making research on this I, the more interesting it will become. And we will eventually find everything else boring, and this alone interesting.
Yeah, you were saying in the introduction about Sadhu one being a true Jnani.
Yes.
What convinced you that he was
Well, let me say first of all, it's not really very important whether he is or not. He himself said, knowing, inquiring, is this person a jnani, is that person a jnani, is all a distraction. It's all an Atma-vichara. The Atma-vichara means inquiring about what is not ourselves. So what we should really be interested in is not whether X or Y is a jnani. We should be interested in knowing whether I am a jnani, whether we ourselves are a jnani. If we investigate ourselves, we will find there is only one jnani, and that is ourself. So long as we are ignorant, if I say Sadhwam is a jnani, who is Sadhwam? I'm talking about a person who lived for 63 years, who had a body, had a life, who wrote some books, this, that, and everything. How can that finite thing be jnani? Because jnana means the infinite. So it's only from our ignorant perspective, we even say Bhagavan is a jnani and point to the form saying this is Bhagavan. Bhagavan is a jnani, but he's not this form.
Yes, but you still say it.
Yes, I know, but this is talking from a relative perspective.
Right, so from that relative perspective, then,
yeah. Well, that's there's nothing I can. It's impossible to prove that X or Y is a jnani. I cannot say anything. It was what I just felt that conviction. I mean, I suppose it was because whatever we talked about Bhagavan's teaching, he was so clear, and he was constantly casting fresh light onto it, as it were. That convinced me. But if you tell me he's not a jnani, that doesn't bother me in the least, because it really doesn't matter to me whether he's a jnani or not, because what he taught me has its own value.
So it doesn't matter where it comes from, as long as it's the true teaching.
That's all that matters. Ultimately, the teaching is only directing us within. So ultimately, where the real truth is coming from is only from within. So who is it outside who points us to, who directs us to turn within, doesn't really matter.
Did he talk in Tamil actually to you, or did he speak
in English? His English wasn't very good. It was a pidgin English, you could say, but because he had natural powers of expression, he was able to explain himself very well. It was fine when he was speaking it, but if he tried to write English, it will appear very ungrammatical and clumsy, and sometimes he says things which will, actually he'll be saying the opposite, but what the words mean is the opposite of what he means, but it's clear what he means. But his English was better than my Tamil will ever be. I can translate from Tamil into English, but my spoken Tamil is still pretty poor.
Your Sanskrit is obviously pretty good.
My Sanskrit is almost not. I know some Sanskrit vocabulary.
I understand what he was saying.
Yes, because it's a verse I'm familiar with. I obviously, after studying Bhagavan's teachings, I got quite a good vocabulary in Sanskrit, but I don't know Sanskrit grammar. Whereas grammatical connection, sometimes I can read a Sanskrit verse and I know what every word means, but I don't know what part of speech it is, how exactly it all ties together.
Has it helped you greatly, this knowledge of Sanskrit?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's useful, but I mean, a lot of my knowledge of Sanskrit is actually by learning Tamil, because in Tamil, particularly in Tamil spiritual literature, so many Sanskrit words are used. So that's why, but I wouldn't try to translate Sanskrit verses. I would have to ask someone what the grammatical connection is. I can sometimes hazard a guess what it means, but someone who knows Sanskrit better than me could point out where I go wrong. Whereas Tamil verses are also difficult, but at least the core of Bhagavan's teaching, his main verses, his original verses, because I'm very familiar with them, I understand the meaning of the words and the grammatical connection between them.
So, do shamanists have infinite knowledge? But when they meet us mortals, they pretend. They can't speak this, they can't speak that, they don't know your name, they don't know who you are, they ask you questions as they're ordinary people.
No.
Do you know? They don't have a kind of infinite knowledge, no?
No, they're ignorant, completely ignorant.
Okay, that's very good.
The only thing a jnani knows is I am.
Okay.
We have infinite knowledge because we know all these things.
Okay. Yes.
But the jnani knows only I am. That's why Bhagavan said, there is nothing new for us to know. We just have to unlearn all the wrong things we've learned.
Okay, so but if I come to meet jnani and they ask me what's your name, they really ask me what's my name. They don't know what my name is.
Yes, but
do you understand?
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. It's not a pretend.
You're talking very deep for me. I understand you're going to a very deep level.
Yeah, because actually, when we say jnani asks our name.
Yes.
We are taking that person to be a jnani. But the jnani's experience is I am.
Okay.
Bhagavan always said, this body is not Bhagavan.
He used to ask what time of day it is, you know? He used to ask ordinary things. What time it is, day, night.
Because
as though he doesn't know. Is he playing the game, you know?
Because he seems to us to be a person.
Okay.
As a person with a body and mind, his knowledge is limited like our knowledge.
Okay.
But he knows the only thing that is real, which is I am. So in fact, he knows everything. But when we talk of jnani knowing everything, we think he knows all these things. He doesn't know any of these things. He knows only I am, which is all there is really to know. In his experience, that alone exists. So by our mind, we cannot understand the state of a jnani.
Of course, thank you.
That's why, in a way, in a sense, it's my ignorance to say Sadhu is a jnani. Because it really has no meaning. He himself used to ridicule, he's written a song actually, Who is Jnani, in which he ridicules he points out the fallacy of saying this person is a jnani, that person is a jnani. Because we take them to be person, they cannot be jnani. If they're jnani, they're not person.
Well, we have to close, unfortunately, at 5:15. Only remains for me to thank you very much for coming to us and for everything you give to us.
Thank you all for making an interesting talk, interesting discussion.